The African American Legends series highlights the accomplishments of blacks in areas as varied as politics, sports, aviation, business, literature, religion, and education. We'll explore how African Americans have succeeded in areas where they'd been previously excluded because of segregation, racism, and lack of opportunity. I'm your host, Dr. Roscoe C. Brown, Jr., and with us today is Howie Evans, sports editor of the legendary Amsterdam News. Hi, Howie. How are you doing?
Hello, Dr. Roscoe Brown.
Well, you've been covering sports for so long. When I asked you what's happening today, you probably going to tell me what happened yesterday. But what's happening today in the world of sports relating to African Americans?
Well, of course, the big thing over the last week or so has been Serena Williams. That's been the major thing.
Well, for the audience who didn't see this or understand, tell us what happened and then talk about the reaction to it.
Well, what happened was, of course, she was favored to win. And she started off poorly in her semifinal match against Kim Clijsters. And Kim Clijsters had been off the tour for 2 years. She'd had a baby and so forth. And she played extremely well all up until the semifinals, Kim Clijsters. She was playing so well, so full of confidence. She was playing so smart, and she was outflanking Serena in the basic game. She was just playing so consistent. And there was a point in the game where Serena got so angry, she took her racket and literally busted it, just destroyed it. Yaka! She hit it on the ground. But you know, in tennis, the etiquette of tennis, you know, that's a no-no. Yeah. And she was assessed a penalty and so forth. And then it was match point in the game, and she was still in it now. All she had to do was win a couple of points to get back in. I mean, match point doesn't mean the game is over in tennis. And the referee, who was a young woman, called a foot foul on her. And no one calls foot fouls in tennis unless you just drag your foot entirely across the line. But it came at match point. That's like unheard of that you would call it. The call was so bad that even the the broadcasters who over the years have been very hostile towards Serena, said, "Oh, that's terrible, that's terrible." You know, it was no foot foul. But meanwhile, Serena just went off. She walks over to the lines lady, and she just looks at her, and then she picks up the ball in her hand, and she's holding the ball like she's going to throw it at her, but she was just holding. I don't think she was going to really throw it at her, but she yelled some obscenities at the line person. And then, of course, the umpire got involved. Then the referee of the tournament got involved, and Serena said, "Well, I didn't say this. You got to be crazy. I would never say nothing like this," and so forth and so on. But then they called a penalty on her, and that point was the match point, and it ended the match. And then she was fined the day after that. She was fined $10,000, you know. But the outcome was that everybody started piling on her from across the country and across the world. Of course, egged on by the media, who, of course, many of them are very biased anyway, who've never had the type of relationship with Serena, Venus, or her father, and so forth. So it seems like they were waiting for her to do something wrong. And she was wrong. There was no question she was wrong. She didn't apologize immediately, but it was like a day or two later she started apologizing and all. But by then, it was too late, because now she's going into damage control. She's going on these different shows and so forth. But that really didn't convince the people, the hardcore media, you know. So now, first of all, they start saying, well, Patrick Monroe, he starts saying, well, she should definitely be suspended from future Grand Slam tournaments. So my thought was, has anyone talked about really suspending you? You're the coach of the U.S. Davis Cup team, and you can't even win the Davis Cup, you know, and so forth, you know. And who was worse, in their behavior on the court than his brother, John McEnroe, who traditionally was tennis's bad boy, you know. So that was a Serena moment, and I think she's learned a lot from that in terms of controlling herself.
Well,
you know.
the Williams systems in tennis and Tiger Woods in golf have been the premier sports people in these sports that have previously been predominantly white. Now, Tiger's hit sort of a bump in the road. What's going on with that?
Well, of course, when he lost, you know, everybody jumped on him. Well, you know, the king is down and so forth and so on. But he came back and won the tournament last week. But Tiger's, he has no problems in golf other than the fact that they expect him to win every week.
Because he's so good.
He's so good. Now, Roscoe, you know darn well in the sport of golf, you can win 30 games in baseball or 30 games in basketball, as the Lakers did back in the day when they won something like 38 straight games. You cannot win every golf tournament. I don't care how great you are. And that's his problem. He is so good, and he's so disciplined that they automatically put him down as the winner in every single tournament. And that's quite a weight to carry, you know, for anyone.
And he puts a lot of pressure on himself, too.
And he puts extremely a lot of pressure on himself because he expects perfection. And even in someone as the greatest player he is, you're not going to be perfect every time you go out there.
Well, the fact that the Williams sisters and Tiger have taken such primacy in tennis and golf, predominantly white sports, it seems to me there must be other sports that are predominantly white that African Americans, if given the opportunity, could succeed in. Can you give an example of a couple of sports that you think that African Americans could succeed in where they've been excluded in the past? Yeah,
without question. Swimming.
Mm-hmm.
Very for example.
Good. Excellent example.
Why we couldn't even count how many times I guess people have asked you as a sportsman, and people have asked me, how come we don't have any African American swimmers? So I tell them one thing: how many swimming pools do you see in our communities?
Number one.
That's number one. They build new high schools, spend $1 billion building a high school, but won't put a swimming pool in the building. And to me, those are not done accidentally, not at all. So swimming is number one. Golf is number two, because as great as Tiger is, and he was supposed to be the hope that would bring so many African Americans into the sport, it hasn't happened, and it's not going to happen because there are no facilities. There are no golf courses. Golf and tennis is a sport in which you have to pay someone to teach you how to play. You can't just go out and pick up a tennis racket and start playing at all. You can't go and play golf unless someone teaches you. So it's a sport that feeds off of people who have those skills. And of course, the people across this country of ours in the African American communities don't have the resources to pay professional people to teach their children how to play golf, how to play tennis, and so forth. Richard Williams was something that will probably never happen again. You know, he was just an extraordinary person with a sense of smartness to understand that he could teach these kids and expose them and make them feel like they would love this sport. And then he was smart enough to move on and not put his kids in those junior tennis programs where it would have cost him more money. But he was smart enough to say, no, Serena and Venus are not going to play junior tennis. They're going to go to school. They're not going to be like these other kids, 14 and 15-year-old girls running around the world playing tennis but not being educated. So these kids have been well educated and continue to educate themselves. But the fact remains is that you can't play tennis or golf hardly anywhere in our communities because there is no place for these kids to play. No one can say that these kids don't like tennis or golf. They're just not exposed to it. They don't have the opportunity at all.
Well, an organization that I work with, the City Parks Foundation, has started some programs in New York City to help with golf and tennis. It's a beginning. Of course, what you're saying, in order to get champions, you have to have thousands and thousands of people playing. But one of the things that the people who watch this show can realize, well, let's see what we can do in our communities to get facilities, to get the training so they can move into another area, is fencing. We've had some championship fencers, which usually comes through schools, but again, there are a limited number of African Americans who are involved in fencing. Another sport is lacrosse, which is a sport I played, which is a great sport. The greatest lacrosse player in history was Jim Brown, the great football player. But a lot of schools in the African American community do not have lacrosse teams. So it's about opportunity. That's what it's about.
And facilities.
Opportunity is facilities and instruction. Now, from the standpoint of what's happening with our black athletes, mainly in football and basketball, who go into college but are not getting an education, what kind of developments do you see there? Do you think it's getting better or getting worse?
Actually, I think it's getting better because we view particularly professional basketball, college basketball, professional football, and college football. We view them as these sports where people don't achieve, and namely African Americans. But that's inaccurate, because we're only talking about, out of the thousands of colleges in the country, we're really only talking about those schools that are in the NCAA Division I, maybe 110 schools, and so forth. But if you go to the Division II level and you go to the Division III level, you see African Americans going to school, graduating, going into engineering programs, going into doctoral programs, becoming professionals in many other areas. But basketball and football on the Division I level are basically money sports that are controlled by people whose interest is only making money. And the colleges themselves, they're extremely guilty, because the monies that come into these schools have helped build science labs, have helped build all kind of buildings on the strength and the backs of these athletes. And on the Division I level, most of them and the high level athletes are all African Americans.
And they don't get an opportunity to get the tutoring and the support that allows them to graduate.
No, they don't. And then they're encouraged not to go to school.
Right.
The dumbest rule that they have in the NCAA, in conjunction with the NBA, and it is one that bothers me to death, is that you have to stay in school for 1 year in basketball. Football, you have to stay till you're a junior. Well, those are the craziest rules I've ever seen. Now, in basketball, an elite basketball player who is recruited, he gets a scholarship, say to go to Notre Dame. Well, okay, so now he's here a year. So this kid only has one thing on his mind: 1 year and I'm out of here. So what happens? The kid don't go to school. You don't go to class. You don't have to go to class, because after the first semester, they say, well, hey, your grades are bad, you're suspended, and so, but it doesn't suspend him from playing. So he can continue playing because he's on probation. As you know, you've been in the higher educational system, so you know the second semester you're on probation. So now you can finish out that year and you're gone.
So there's no incentive for them to go to school.
None at all, and that's crazy. And I don't blame it on the kids, because they're only dealing with the system as it is, and this is what the system tells them that they should do. But on the other hand, we only look at the high-profile athletes who move on to the NBA and the NFL. We don't look at those other kids who do stay and go to school. So when people come out with all of these statistics, those statistics are based on one level of play, Division One, not on all the other levels, where there are thousands of more collegiate athletes participating wholesomely in activities that will move them on educationally and athletically.
Well, the graduation rate among the Division II and Division III schools is much higher, of course, because they don't have that incentive to leave to go to the pros.
Exactly.
In a sense, college sports, big-time sports, and football and basketball are really minor leagues. And I have advocated for a long time that they should just pay the participants and give them the opportunity to go to school on their own time. So therefore, that might give them the idea that maybe education is a good thing.
Yeah, I agree with you, and I've said this all along. I've said before, why don't you make those just minor leagues? You have those minor league systems. Why don't you just take the baseball and make it your minor leagues and let the kids stay in school and get their education and get paid?
That's exactly it. Yeah.
You know, I mean, listen. Don't we do it in the science labs?
Of course we do.
And don't we do it in all these other labs on the colleges?
They can work on the side and get their skill. But part of it is that sports in America is the new religion. And people are going to do whatever they're going to do in order to highlight sports, and then it's a new economic force. Because sports give you television revenue, give you revenue with cable systems, give you revenue with advertising and so on. Sport is an integral part of American society, and African Americans are the center of that, but in many ways are exploited because they're not given the opportunity to get the skills. Another area where I think African Americans are exploited is sports media. You're very fortunate and very good and very persistent to stay in the sports media for such a long period of time. But African Americans still do not have the opportunities in the sports media that they should have. What do you think is happening in regard to opening up those opportunities?
I think that they will basically remain where they are now at a very low level. Administratively, when I say administratively, I mean the sports editors, executive sports editors, and all. There are only a handful of African American sports editors of mainstream newspapers, as we call them, daily newspapers and whatever, in the country. And but when you look at it, when you do have an African American sports editor, there's always somebody on another level above this guy. So he still isn't the main guy who's going to pull the trigger and all. He doesn't have that top exclusivity to do whatever he wants to do that he feels is good for his department and so forth. So when you have an African American sports editor, say like Leon Carter at the Daily News, maybe I shouldn't call out names, but his sports department is predominantly white. So that's what has to be addressed. No matter what anyone says, no matter what he says, that has to be addressed. There are no really black writers at that paper. You know, they got Tim Smith, who is a columnist, and they have a couple of other guys and so forth. But basically, that department, and like it is at most of the, particularly here in New York.
Why is that? You know, racism is involved in everything, but is it the fact that we don't have enough African Americans trained to be sports writers? I know you worked on that. Or is it the fact that at the beginning level they don't get an opportunity to hone that craft?
No, quite the opposite, because it's almost a favoritism system. We have writers at papers in New York where they're working with their fathers. We have television people all over television land, and all you got to do is see the names and say, oh, that's so-and-so's son. Now, these guys, because they are at the top of their game, so to speak, they're able to bring their kids in. Now, I don't get angry at them like that, because you and I would love to have that opportunity where we could bring our sons or daughters into and start them off in sports level jobs and entry level jobs where they could hone their craft, you know. And that's what we have in particularly in New York. We have people in in sports jobs. We have people in internships who are hired because they are friendly with people who are within the department of the different pro sports organizations. And all. We have more kids now going into sports journalism than we've ever had before, but they can't get jobs. They can't get jobs. And I've trained and had a lot of kids working with me who have moved on to other areas and so forth, moved on to other organizations. And I encourage them to move on, because you shouldn't stand still. You should keep striving to be the best that you can.
Now, how can we break this? Occasionally you have a celebrity athlete who gets a television show or is able to write a column, African American, but we don't have this infusion of African Americans who predominate, particularly in football and basketball, in various commentator and announcer positions. What can we do to move that along?
Well, the 99% of the African Americans who have jobs in sports media and Major League Baseball, pro football, and basketball, 99% of them are former athletes who played in the NFL, NBA, or Major League Baseball. That system is not bred to train these kids coming out of these journalism schools, because the jobs immediately are given to ex-athletes and so forth. So there's no system whereby these kids can really get into and become commentators or become analysts or become play-by-play persons, because the jobs are all taken up by African Americans who, who are sports figures, you see. And it's almost like, well, we got to balance this out. We got to have some blacks on this program, we got to have some blacks on this program.
But they're not necessarily trained to be sports journalists.
No.
Now, you have been the sports editor for the Amsterdam News, one of the prime black papers in this country. This is the 100th anniversary of the Amsterdam News. How do you think the Amsterdam News has influenced the coverage of blacks in sports over these 100 years?
Well, that's a great question, and I have seen it just recently. I see what's happening now. The two tabloids of the city now have recognized what we have been doing, although they'll never admit it, because my focus is really on the community and local stuff and local kids and what's going on. So and that's what keeps us going in our department. All of a sudden now, over the last year or so, the tabloids have said, oh, wait a minute, these guys been doing this all these years. So now they are jumping in to high school sports on the TV level and on the newspaper level. They're starting these big sections on local sports. Now we've been doing that for 100 years. This is our 100th celebration year. We've been doing it for 100 years.
I know. I grew up in Washington, D.C. with the African American, the Pittsburgh Courier, the Washington Tribune. And then when I came to New York, I've been reading the Amsterdam News ever since. And that's where you get the information about who's coming up, what they're doing, what the challenges are, and what their successes are. I noticed particularly in Amsterdam, you do a lot of coverage of success of young African Americans in high school and junior high school sports, as well as in college sports. How do you keep up with all this?
Well, first, people understand that we are the prime source of this. Actually, Roscoe, we get more requests for coverages from organizations that are really not African-based organizations, because this is the only way we're going to get some ink for our kids. So they call us, like track, for instance. And you were a great track person. We cover that track season all year.
You do. And
all year we cover every meet. And I've gone to the schools now. I've gone to predominantly white schools on Long Island, and I've seen Amsterdam News on the bulletin board of their kids running track up at the Armory and all. So I know that people just want to see some recognition of what their school is doing, what their coaches are doing, and what the kids are doing. You know, they don't care whether it's in this paper. All they know, it's in a newspaper, and this newspaper has my kid's picture in it.
Well, one thing you do in the Amsterdam Sports Center, have a lot of pictures. People love to see their athletes, love to see themselves, and I think that helps to sell the paper, as a matter of fact.
Well, you know, if we put in, if I edit in a whole page of team pictures and with the kids and all, we know that every parent or every guardian is going to buy that paper for their kids. We know that, and all, because people like to see their pictures in the paper.
And it tells a story.
And it tells a story.
You have action pictures as well as pictures of the winners and so on. It tells a story about what's happening on the sports field, and that together with the editorial part of it is very, very important.
I saw that with your Harlem Renaissance road race that you started. When we put all those pictures in the paper, we had more non-African American readers coming to that paper or calling to see how they can get the paper.
That's really great. Today on African American Legend, we've been talking with Howie Evans, sports editor of the Amsterdam News, which is celebrating its 100th anniversary this year. Thanks for being with us today, Howie.
Thank you, Roscoe. Enjoyed it.